begun her mission. Enjoy the liftoff, everyone. We'll see you afterward.
Largage du mât KZM. À tous de DDO, attention pour le début de la séquence d'allumage du lanceur. Top, H0 moins 20 secondes. Largage du mât VKM. Allumage triétage. Tous de DDO, attention pour le début de le décompte final. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Décollage.
Into the clouds and out of the clouds, and you can still see the fire, and you saw those fine shots, always impressive, no matter how many times you see Soyuz powering into the sky above French Guiana. At liftoff, 307 tons. The DDO is saying all is perfect on board, all is nominal. We're going to follow her mass profile because she's going to shed a lot of weight very quickly. Rami, can you describe briefly the launcher for us?
Yes. The launcher is divided in two parts. The lower composite is a tri-stages Soyuz manufactured by Akatsi. The upper composite is a frigate stage manufactured by NPOL with the payload. About that, there is often a confusion because people use the same word Soyuz to talk about the complete launcher or the lower composite.
But in fact, it's actually two parts.
Yes, exactly. From the Soyuz point of view, the upper composite is assimilated to a payload as another. And the goal of Soyuz is to inject the upper part onto a suborbital orbit. After that, the frigate will manage the rest of the missions, and that's all.
We have had successful separation of the boosters, and you saw it on the animation.
Yes.
On the bottom of your screen, our altitude, you can see 53 kilometers up, and our speed, that's vitesse in French, just approaching 2 kilometers per second. The figures coming in from the downrange tracking stations into Rami's office, and we'll have more on that in a moment. Raphael, how many times have you seen a liftoff?
In real?
In real life, yeah.
It was in 2005 from Kuru. And this is something that you really remember.
Yeah. You were outside.
I was outside. I was at 5 kilometers from the launcher. I think this is the closest you can get from the launcher.
4 or 5 kilometers, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you're on board.
Sorry?
Unless you're on board.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I really remember the bright light coming from the sky and the sound coming from the ground. This is really impressive. But most of the time we see it on TV. Yeah.
You saw some people from the European Space Agency, Europe's space effort, a three-way affair, of course, with Arianespace, the French Space Agency, CNES, and the European Space Agency. Generally speaking, roughly, Arianespace responsible for marketing and operating the launch vehicle, ESA and its member states funding the new programs, and the CNES, the French agency, coordinating all the space base operations. Next up, fairing jettison. Before that, we are flying north to what kind of an orbit? We're going around the sun.
We're not going around the sun, but we are going around the Earth in low Earth orbit, but in a sun-synchronous orbit. So it means that when we launch the satellite there, on this orbit, the satellite will fly by an area, the one he wants to observe, at a certain time during the day. And this time is not going to change through the mission of the satellite. So it means that, for example, it flies by at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Then it's always going to fly by an area at this time, and this time is not going to change.
Confirmation of the fairing jettison.
We have had fairing jettison, right? Thank you, because you have the confirmation of the DDO in your ear. The separation of fairing coming at about 150 kilometers altitude. Our speed now, as you can see, over 3 kilometers per second. Why is the fairing jettison so important? I know it's a key milestone.
Yes, good question, because as soon as the launcher leaves the atmosphere, the satellite doesn't need anymore to be protected. Yeah. As each kilogram is important, the unuseful fairing mass is ejected. But without the fairing jettisoning, the satellite would stay prisoner inside it. So this is why it's so important for us to have this confirmation.
We've had second stage separation. You followed it on the animation, and ignition of the third stage. You see on the screen the names of our downrange tracking stations. The Galileo station is in French Guiana. The Bermuda station, followed by Saint-Hubert, which is outside of Montreal. We'll have a word about them coming up.
Confirmation of the ignition of the block I.
So we are right on time. The name Soyuz is, of course, familiar to you, going back to the early days of the space race, and Raphael will talk about that in just a minute. It's the workhorse of the Soviet and now, of course, the Russian and the European space program. And Soyuz in Kuru is thanks to a long association between the Russians and the Europeans, yeah?
Yeah, I think it goes back to 1966, when the General de Gaulle, that you probably heard of.
Heard the name?
Yeah. Actually, he had the chance, and he was the first political leader in Western world to attend the launch from Baikonur, and he actually was so impressed that he pushed for a first-of-a-kind cooperation between French and USSR. And this cooperation became, with time, a unique cooperation between Europe and Russia. And in the years 2000, there was like a very emblematic mission that were launched from Baikonur by Soyuz.
You're talking about the Mars?
For example, towards Mars or towards Venus.
We'll get back to that later, yeah.
Exactly.
But go ahead. But go ahead.
Yeah. And then this pushed some discussions about transferring the Soyuz from Baikonur to Kuru, which was very challenging and ambitious idea.
And rather visionary for the times.
Yeah, exactly, because like transferring a foreign launcher in your launch pad, this is, I think this is like really unique in the space sector. And this happened with time, and the first launch of Soyuz from Kuru happened in 2011, so almost 10 years ago.
10 years. Next year, we'll be celebrating 10 years of Soyuz in French Guiana. Romy, where you usually work is an office called the CVI.
Yep.
And what's the function of the CVI? It treats all the telemetry. We saw the stations earlier. What's its role?
Oh, indeed. The CVI is a real-time monitoring. And this real-time monitoring of the launcher is probably the most important ground operation during the flight. It allows to check that the flight is nominal and to confirm to our customer that the satellite is separated as expected. Yeah. The data collected by the ground tracking station are immediately sent to the Soyuz Control Center in French Guiana and to the Frigate Fly Monitoring Center.
That's in Moscow.
Yes. About that, presently, 2 colleagues are in Kuru for the real-time monitoring, Adeline Roquier and Thomas Secretin. And 2 other colleagues are in Évry, and not in Moscow due to the pandemic, to collect the orbital diagnosis, Claude Legrand and Antoine Courtois. So hello to my colleague.
We have had acquisition of our next downrange tracking station. It's the Bermuda Islands. We're flying north along the east coast of the U.S. The Bermuda station was a NASA station, I think, renovated in 2018. The European Space Agency first began studying the possibility of launching Soyuz from French Guiana back in 1998, and they started the program in 2004. Coming up on separation and extinction of the third stage, there's the nozzle shutting down, and separation coming up, and there you are, right on time. Do we get confirmation?
Confirmation of the extension of the Bloy arc.
Our altitude, 375 kilometers, our speed climbing to approaching 7.